Before sunrise, the temperature has already dropped to -23. The St. Lawrence River is locked, not partially, completely. Ice extends from shore to shore, pale and motionless under a sky that has not yet decided whether to lighten. Somewhere beneath that stillness, a current still moves. You cannot see it, but the ship knows it is there. This is She is 120 meters long, displaces nearly 14,000 tons, and runs on engines producing over 27,000 horsepower. She is not here for exploration. She is not on a scientific mission. She is here because a tanker needs to move, and the tanker cannot do that alone. Not through this. The tanker, waiting 2 kilometers behind her, carries refined petroleum products, heating oil, diesel, bound for communities along the lower Gulf of St. Lawrence, towns that have no road access in winter, towns where this delivery is not optional. The temperature on the exposed deck of the tanker has been -19 for 6 hours. On the bridge of the Aki, the ice navigator studies the satellite imagery from the last 6 hours. The channel they used 3 days ago has refrozen. A new track will need to be broken. The ice here is first-year ice, between 80 and 140 centimeters thick. Hard enough to hold a loaded truck. Hard enough to stop a ship with the wrong hull. The engines come to power slowly. The vibration begins somewhere deep in the hull. A low physical hum that you feel in your legs before you hear it. The crew on watch has been awake since 0300. There are no complaints logged. This is the schedule. This is the work. The Sept Laurent, Louis S. Saint Laurent begins to move. The bow meets the ice, and the sound is immediate, a dry, compressive crack that carries across the frozen surface for hundreds of meters. The ice does not give easily. The ship rides up onto it first, using its own weight to fracture the surface from above. This is how icebreaking works. It is not violent. It is patient. The open channel behind the ship fills with fractured slabs, grey-white pieces the size of dining tables, tumbling slowly in the wake. The water exposed beneath them is black and still. The temperature of that water is -1.8 degrees Celsius, the freezing point of seawater. It will begin to skin over again within minutes if the ship stops. Behind the icebreaker, maintaining a following distance of exactly 400 meters, the tanker enters the broken channel. Its hull is not rated for independent ice navigation. It relies entirely on the track cut ahead. The tanker's captain watches the channel edges on his radar. 1 degree off course and the hull meets unbroken ice. The result would be structural damage, possibly worse. The wind is coming from the northwest at 35 knots. At -23, that wind carries a chill factor that drops the effective temperature to -40. On the open deck, exposed skin begins to suffer frostbite in under 10 minutes. The crew knows this. They work in pairs. No one goes to the exterior deck alone. This is policy. It is also survival. The Gulf of St. Lawrence freezes differently each year. The timing, the thickness, the pressure ridges, none of it is fixed. In a mild winter, first-year ice may reach only 60 centimeters. In a hard winter like this one, it can exceed 150 centimeters. Time equals 200 milliseconds, / greater than in sheltered bays. The ridges, where ice sheets have buckled against each other under pressure, can reach 3 meters or more. No tanker crosses those unescorted. The ship's hull is designed specifically for this. The bow is rounded and strengthened, an ice-class hull built to Arctic I standards. The steel plating below the waterline is 35 millimeters thick in the ice belt zone. When the ship climbs a pressure ridge, the weight is distributed across a reinforced keel structure. The ship groans. It is the sound of the hull flexing under load. This is expected. This is engineered. In the engine room, 2 engineers are on watch. The propulsion system runs on 4 diesel-electric engines producing a combined 27,200 shaft horsepower. Power is transferred to 3 propeller shafts, 2 aft, 1 forward. The forward propeller is unusual. It allows the ship to pull broken ice under the hull and clear it rearward, maintaining hull contact with the channel sides. Progress through the pressure ridge field is slow. The ship averages 3 knots, roughly 5.5 kilometers per hour, a normal transit speed in open water for a vessel this size. Time equals 200 milliseconds / greater than would be 15 knots. In extreme ridge ice, the ship may slow to less than 1 knot. Sometimes it must back up and make multiple passes at the same section before breaking through. There is no rushing this. On the bridge, the captain communicates with the tanker master by VHF radio every 20 minutes. The tanker is instructed to maintain a steady following distance. If the icebreaker slows unexpectedly, the tanker must react. Closing the gap risks collision. Opening the gap risks losing the channel to refreezing. It is a narrow operational margin. Both captains understand this, without being told. The communities this tanker serves are not large, villages along the north shore of the Gulf, where the road network ends. Some have populations under 500. But they share the same winter heating requirements as any other place in this latitude. The tanker carries between 8,000 and 12,000 tons of product. For these communities, this single delivery can represent months of fuel supply. By mid-morning, time equals 200 milliseconds / greater than the convoy has covered 11 kilometers. The ship's track record shows they have broken through the main ridge field. Ahead, the ice flattens. First-year sheet ice, continuous, approximately 1 meter thick. The icebreaker increases speed to 5 knots. The channel widens slightly. The tanker follows without instruction. There is a rhythm to this work when conditions allow. The lookout on the bridge wing reports a pressure crack running at an angle across the planned route. The captain adjusts heading by 4 degrees north. The adjustment is minor. The effect is significant. The new angle allows the bow to approach the crack at a more favorable angle, reducing the energy required to cross it. Ice navigation is geometry as much as it is power. 2 crew members are sent to the bow with ice poles and thermal cameras. Their role is to watch for unusual ice formations directly ahead that radar may not resolve at close range. This is human judgment applied to a technical problem, a recognition that the technology aboard is capable and necessary, but not sufficient on its own. Eyes remain part of the system. At 13:40 hours, the convoy enters the coastal approach to Havre-Saint-Pierre. The water depth here drops sharply, from 180 meters in open Gulf to under 40 meters in the harbor approach. The icebreaker switches to low-power maneuvering mode. The tanker reduces speed to 2 knots. The harbor mouth is 200 meters wide. The approach channel is marked by yellow and red buoys, most of them now partially buried in shore ice. Inside the harbor, the icebreaker performs a full sweep, moving across the harbor basin to break up the accumulated ice before the tanker enters. This is routine. It is also essential. A tanker cannot maneuver efficiently through a harbor packed with loose ice slabs. The icebreaker clears a path first, then holds position while the tanker makes its approach to the pier. The tanker docks at 15-18 hours. The mooring lines go out through ice-covered bollards. The transfer hoses are connected at -18 degrees. The crew works in heavy gloves that reduce dexterity. The connections must still be exact. Petroleum transfer lines operate at high pressure. Every fitting must seal completely. There is no margin for imprecision here either. While the tanker transfers cargo, the icebreaker does not stand down. Her crew logs weather data, updates ice charts, and prepares the return transit briefing. The return route will differ from the inbound route. Ice conditions shift during the day as temperatures fluctuate and wind changes direction. A channel that existed at 0600 may no longer be passable at 1800. The route is re-evaluated every transit. The cargo transfer takes 4 hours and 20 minutes. 9,400 tons of heating oil and diesel pass through the hoses. The shore tanks, large cylindrical steel structures at the edge of the village, fill slowly. When they are full, this community will have a supply buffer for the remainder of the ice season. That buffer is not abstract. It is the difference between heat and cold in a region where cold means danger. At 1940 hours, the tanker is ready to depart. Darkness has fully arrived. The temperature has dropped to -27. The wind has increased to 42 knots. On the harbour surface, new ice has already begun to form, a thin, translucent skin on the cleared water. The icebreaker breaks the harbour ice again before the tanker backs away from the pier. The process that began this morning begins again in Niassa, reverse. The outbound transit through the Gulf ice takes longer. Temperatures have dropped further and the broken channel has partially refrozen. The icebreaker must rework sections of the earlier track. The tanker follows at reduced speed, 2.5 knots. Wind-driven snow reduces visibility to under 400 meters at intervals. The radar aboard both vessels is the primary navigational tool for these periods. The Canadian Coast Guard operates a fleet of icebreakers across multiple regions: the Gulf of St. Lawrence, the St. Lawrence River, the Great Lakes, and the Arctic. Each vessel is assigned a specific operational area. During peak winter months, the demand for escort services often exceeds available capacity. Priority is given to vessels carrying essential supplies, fuel, food, medical cargo, ahead of commercial freight. The climate record in the Gulf of St. Lawrence shows a long-term trend of reducing ice coverage and duration. 50 years ago, the Gulf could remain substantially ice-covered for up to 5 months. In recent decades, that window has shortened. But the operational reality remains. In severe winters, ice still closes the shipping lanes completely. The icebreaker fleet is not a relic. It is a working necessity. At 0210 hours, the convoy clears the major ice field and enters more open water. The icebreaker reduces escort intensity. The tanker is now capable of maintaining its own heading through the remaining light ice. The icebreaker holds position nearby, monitoring by radar. This is the end of active escort. It is not the end of the watch. The icebreaker's crew works in 6-hour watches. By the time the morning shift arrives on the bridge at 0600, the previous watch has been awake since midnight. There is no overlap of fatigue here. The relief crew comes prepared. Coffee is made. The logbook is reviewed. The ice situation report from Environment Canada is pulled. The next transit is already being planned. The officers who serve aboard Canadian Coast Guard icebreakers hold ice navigator certificates issued under Transport Canada standards. The certification requires documented experience in ice conditions, written examinations, and a passage record. An ice navigator is not a title given quickly. It accumulates over seasons, over winters spent in these waters, reading ice that textbooks can only approximate. Not all escort operations in Canadian waters involve the Gulf. In the Western Arctic, Canadian Coast Guard vessels escort bulk carriers along the Northwest Passage routes during the narrow summer navigation window. In the Beaufort Sea, supply vessels heading to offshore oil installations operate under escort through shifting multi-year ice. Ice that is older, denser, and far more resistant than anything found in the Gulf. Multi-year ice is categorized separately from first-year ice. It has survived at least one summer melt season. During that process, salt is expelled from the ice structure, making it harder and denser than first-year ice. Its color is a distinctive blue-white. An icebreaker that can move through 2 meters of first-year ice may be stopped by 1 meter of multi-year ice. The material is that different. Back in the Gulf, it is now 08:15 on the following morning. He is already repositioning for a second escort. A cargo vessel, a general freighter carrying food supplies, construction materials and fuel, is waiting at the edge of the ice pack near Island. The vessel master has filed an escort request with the Canadian Coast Guard Marine Communications and Traffic Services Centre at the Communications and Traffic Services Centre coordinates all vessel traffic in the Gulf and River system. It tracks ice conditions through a combination of satellite imagery, aerial ice reconnaissance flights, and direct vessel reports. When the icebreaker departs for a transit, the centre is in continuous communication. If conditions change suddenly, new ridge formation, unexpected snowstorm, the transit route is adjusted in real time. The freighter waiting near has been stationary for 11 hours. The ship's master reports the ice pressing against the hull has produced a series of stress sounds, intermittent metallic groaning, that the crew has been monitoring. The vessel is not in immediate danger, but the situation is not comfortable. The icebreaker's arrival is confirmed for 1100. The crew of the freighter is advised to maintain engine warmth and standby status. The icebreaker arrives at the freighter's position at 10:57. The ice conditions around the freighter are complex. A mix of first-year sheet ice and broken pan ice that has compacted under wind pressure from the northeast. The ice navigator aboard assesses the situation from close range. He selects a route that approaches the freighter from the southwest, against the direction the ice is being pushed, to minimize the risk of compaction during extraction. The extraction takes 2 hours and 40 minutes. The icebreaker must make 11 separate passes around the freighter's hull before the vessel is free to maneuver. On the 7th pass, a section of compacted ice the size of a tennis court shifts and begins to move, driven by the icebreaker's propeller wash. The freighter's bridge team watches its movement carefully. It passes 30 meters from the hull without contact. This is the margin that matters. By 1400, the freighter is free. It follows the icebreaker into open water. The transit to the vessel's destination takes another 6 hours through moderate pack ice. The convoy arrives after dark. No ceremony. The freighter ties up at the commercial pier. Cargo. Operations begin immediately. The icebreaker takes on fuel and provisions. By 0300, she is underway again. The work of an icebreaker is not visible to most of the people whose lives depend on it. The heating oil arrives, the diesel flows, the shelves are stocked. None of that tells the story of the 40-knot wind, the -27 temperature, the 11 passes through compacted ice, or the 6-hour overnight transit in a snowstorm. It does not need to tell that story. The ship does the work whether it is seen or not. The ice will return tomorrow. Another channel will need to be cut. Another tanker will be waiting at the pack edge, engines idling, the crew watching the horizon for the red and white hull they know is coming. The icebreaker will arrive. The work will begin again. The Gulf does not ask whether this is convenient. The Gulf simply freezes, and the ship, as it has every winter, goes out to meet it.